Good morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where you are in the world. We are very glad that you can join us today. I am going to be moderating this webinar, and we have an excellent panel of people who have been working in the environmental field, bringing in new data sources to better monitor the environment. This is something that is very close to my heart as well. I worked on the SDG indicators with UNEP from the time that they were adopted up until very recently, and now I've joined the Convention on Biological Diversity, where I am trying to do something very similar with the biodiversity indicators for the Global Biodiversity Framework. So again, my name is Jillian Campbell, and thank you for joining us. This webinar is the 20th in a series hosted by the UN Statistics Division as part of the run-up to the World Data Forum. As you know, the World Data Forum would have already taken place, but now it's going to be taking place hopefully this year in person in Bern. This forum aims to foster cooperation and open dialogue among governments, academia, international agencies, private sector, and civil society, with a focus on how data can be used to accelerate progress on the SDGs. So before we start, I just want to remind everyone of a few things. Please keep your mic on mute. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with how these types of meetings work. So unless you're actually a designated speaker, keep your mic on mute. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat function. We would love to hear from you in terms of where you're coming from and who you are. And you can also ask questions in the chat function. We've also received a number of questions before the meeting, which we have picked from, and we will be using some of those in the panel discussion. And so the panelists will respond to some of the questions that we've already received, plus the live questions that come through the chat window. So finally, in terms of housekeeping, as I said, just feel free to put who you are in the chat function, the country that you're from, whether you work for the NSO or some other government ministry or the private sector or an NGO, and welcome again. So our topic for today is the use of innovative data sources to measure SDG progress on the environment. And if you are familiar with the environmental SDGs, about a third of the SDGs in the global SDG list are related to the environment. However, based on an analysis that was done a bit more than a year ago, called Measuring Progress Towards Achieving the Environmental Dimension of the SDGs, there's not sufficient data for assessing progress for 68% of those 93 environment-related SDG indicators. So if we're going to actually be able to measure the environment in a way that allows us to make better policy interventions and investments, then we need better data. Additionally, when you're missing data, then it creates sort of a vicious cycle where you are making decisions on the data that you don't have, and then you're also deprioritizing investment in the collection of that data a lot of times because you are just sort of making decisions on the data that you don't have. And so we really need to turn this around and have a shift in terms of how we view environmental data and how we collect it. And the only way to make this happen is through non-traditional data sources, because in order to build up a statistical system across so many different indicators, we have to use all of the information that we have. So this may be satellite data, it may be other types of IoT devices, it might be citizen science, and this is the kind of thing that we're going to be discussing today. So with that, I would like to introduce you to the amazing panel. I'm going to quickly introduce the panel, and then we'll move on to the first panelist. So our first panelist is going to be R.G. Cavada. She is an earth scientist charged with leading NASA's efforts to extend the use of earth science and applications in support of the SDGs. She serves as the executive director for the Earth Observation for Sustainable Development Goals Initiative, which is a growing network of the Group on Earth Observations, or GEO, and NASA. She also works at NASA representing the Committee on Earth Observation Satellites SDG Working Group. And then the second panelist is going to be Lorenzo De Simone. He is a geospatial specialist at the Office of the Chief Statistician at FAO. For the last 15 years, he's worked in this capacity in terms of Earth observation, being an Earth observation expert in the field of land cover mapping, crop mapping, and ecological modeling. He's been responsible for a number of different specific projects in Africa, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia. Then we have Dilek Frazel, who is a research scholar at the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, or IASA. She is the chair of the European Commission-funded We Observe SDG and Citizen Science Community of Practice. And this community aims to foster collaboration and consolidate knowledge on the contribution of citizen science to the SDGs across the global citizen science and data and statistics communities. And then our last panelist is going to be Jimena Jerez, who is an advisor of the governing board of the National Institute of Statistics and Geography of Mexico, or INEGI. She's worked in virtual and augmented reality, as well as 3D geometry processing, and she previously worked for the Department of Informatics as a mobile developer. And so that is the panel, and I can see lots of people from all over are now joining us. And with that, I will hand over to our first panelist. RG, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Gillian, and hello everyone. It's fantastic to be here connected to you with you virtually. Today I want to start this discussion by speaking a bit about the role of Earth observations in support of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Global Indicator Framework. I also want to highlight a few examples of where the international community of Earth observations working closely with the statistical and geospatial communities have worked together to enable the integration of geospatial information, including Earth observation data and statistics for sustainable development. So let's go to the next slide, please. So first of all, what are Earth observations? These include space-based or remotely sensed data, as well as ground-based or in situ data about our planet, whether it be atmospheric, oceanic, or terrestrial related information. And so they help provide spatial, spectral, as well as temporal information that can be processed and then transformed into variables or high-level products that are useful to produce indicators and inform relevant SDG targets and goals. And so the international community, including the Group on Earth Observations, which is a global network of governments and other stakeholders such as academic and research institutions, data providers, and private sector, among others, have worked with other contributors to map the relevance of Earth observations for targets and indicators and highlight the potential added improvements that Earth observations provide in indicator methodologies, in addition to long-term benefits in support of the SDG indicator framework. And so you can see here on the slide some of this mapping across different observations and how these link to the different goals, but also a mapping that we've done across the targets and the indicators. There are also different compendia and handbooks that have been produced that analyze the indirect or direct contribution of different types of Earth observations to these targets and indicators. And you can find these at the website highlighted here, eo4sdg.org. So I invite you to visit this website and look at some of these compendia and analysis done. Let's go to the next slide, please. So in the next few slides, I want to highlight some examples of where GEO, the Group on Earth Observations, and in collaboration with UN agencies as well as other partnering organizations have worked to test and then integrate the use of different types of Earth observation data into methodologies as well as tools and platforms in support of different SDG areas. And so the first example that you see here is work from the Geo Blue Planet initiative with UN Environment and partners to advance the use of Earth observations to monitor coastal eutrophication and marine litter, leveraging Earth observation data. And so satellites are capable of monitoring variables such as chlorophyll concentrations at high frequency over space and over time. And so then different ways of viewing the data can help provide insights into the measured quantity of chlorophyll A in surface water and thus inferring changes in the quality of the water. In addition, satellite Earth observation data can help provide information in terms of the presence of algae in surface waters. And so these are just some of the ways in which they can contribute toward informing the Sustainable Development Indicator 14.1 on coastal eutrophication. And so the Geo Blue Planet initiative has worked with UN Environment to develop a methodology that looks at combining this information with in situ and ground-based observations. In addition to also working with other partners such as ESRI to help produce statistics for the global indicators. And they have also developed a dashboard to serve as a eutrophication decision support tool to help identify eutrophication hotspots. And so you can see the link here on the screen. In addition, another area, as mentioned, has been worked toward monitoring marine litter, leveraging different methods of monitoring and also different types of data. And so some of the ways of collecting data include visual human observation, imagery and videos from different platforms such as unmanned aerial vehicles or ship-based cameras, in addition to satellite information, among others. And so currently there is work and there is a paper that has been produced looking at these different types of data that are available on marine litter. And there is also work in progress to develop a so-called digital ecosystem for marine litter information. I know that our colleague Dilek will also speak about some of this work from the citizen science data perspective and use. So another example that I have highlighted here is an effort led by the Group on Earth Observations Land Degradation Neutrality Initiative in collaboration with the UN Convention to Combat Desertification and many other stakeholders. And so here, they have brought together a variety of governments and Earth observation data providers to help develop minimum data quality standards, analytical tools, and also support capacity development efforts on the use of remote sensing data to help support land degradation monitoring and reporting. And so as part of this effort, the group is looking at how globally available Earth observation data sets can help support country efforts and complement national data for the three main areas of this indicator: land cover, land productivity, and soil organic carbon data. And so they're looking at key requirements for the global data sets to contribute and for the suitability of those data sets in supporting country efforts, including the temporal coverage, the timeliness of the data, the spatial coverage, the appropriate spatial resolution, among other things. Let's go to the next slide, please. The next example that I wanted to highlight is an effort led by the Group on Earth Observations for Sustainable Development Goals, or EO4 SDG initiative, which is an initiative within GEO that focuses on the use of Earth observations, in particular for SDGs, with UN Habitat and many international contributors to to help make Earth observation data and tools of relevance to urban-related priorities and needs or challenges more findable and available. And so this is an online knowledge resource that is the aim of it is to be continually updated with this information. And as you can see from the video here, there are data and tools that are filtered by different parameters, including relevance to a specific SDG indicator, data types, formats, as well as geographic level and keywords, in addition to different tools. And there are also use cases. And so the use cases outline how city or national governments and global research networks have already applied Earth observation data to fill monitoring gaps and support the production of urban-related indicators. And the last thing that I will say here is that this information has also been grouped under 4 thematic areas: housing, public transport, urbanization, and open public spaces. And those correspond to 4 of the UN-defined targets and related indicators under Goal 11. Again, this is a contribution of many different partners, and as part of this website, there is a directory where you can find and reach, find contact information and be able to reach out to representatives from cities, country level agencies such as statistics office or ministries and others that have been involved and have contributed to this website. There are also ongoing efforts to further improve upon and develop additional material that will be tailored to different audiences. And so we do invite you to visit this site. You have the link there, and I will add it to the chat, and share your feedback. Let us know if you find the information useful, what other items you may want to see. If you have specific information to contribute in terms of data or tools or use cases, would love to hear from you. And if you're interested in getting involved in some of this work more actively, also please let us know. So let's go to the last slide that I think it's the last slide that I have, and one last example of ongoing work between GEO, the Group on Earth Observations, UN Environment, the Committee on Earth Observation, Satellites, CEOS, and many other contributors has been in working to enable the use of the data in support of tracking changes in the extent and other related parameters of freshwater related ecosystems. And so some of the areas that you see highlighted here are work that has been supported through this collaboration in terms of developing a global method that leverages Earth observation data sets as a way to provide a foundation for monitoring components of indicator 661, change in spatial extent of open water bodies. There is also a platform that UN Environment, in collaboration with the European Commission Joint Research Center, Google, and with contributions from other space agencies such as NASA, the European Space Agency, JAXA, and others have contributed toward. And so in addition to these efforts, there is a recognition, and a lot of the stakeholders we have been working with are letting us know, but there is also a need for developing national capacities and helping also provide analysis that is country-specific and ecosystem-specific. And so you see here highlighted some additional efforts in terms of technical projects, specific apps or tools that are country-specific or ecosystem-specific apps and tools, and also webinars, among other ways of building capacity to help really countries have the ability to access, analyze, and interpret the data in support of actions, related actions and decision-making. And so if we go to the next slide, I think these were all the examples that I wanted to share with you today. I'm happy to take questions at the end. And please reach out to me if you have questions. Also, if you are on Twitter, you can follow at EU4SDG and get more updates in terms of our work there. Thank you.
Thank you, RG, for this excellent presentation, and it provides a great demonstration of the wide applications of Earth observation for a number of different SDGs, which it's here when we're talking about the environmental SDGs, we are talking about a very broad spectrum of SDGs. For those of you who are joining late, I just want to mention that we are going to save all of the questions for the end of the presentations. So feel free to put your questions in the chat, and then there will be a chance for question and answers after we finish the presentations when we have the panel discussion. So with that, I will move on to the presentation from Lorenzo. Lorenzo, you have the floor. Lorenzo, are you there? Hello?
Okay, here I am. I'm trying to share my screen. Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Okay, can you tell me if the screen has been shared? Yes.
It looks like it's starting to share right now.
Okay, just need to launch my PowerPoint. There it is. Please let me know when it's ready. In the meanwhile, I can start to introduce myself. So my name is Lorenzo De Simone. I'm a senior Earth observation expert in the Office of the Chief Statistician in FAO. And I work mainly on the developing methodologies of testing methodologies using Earth observation for the monitoring of SDGs under FAO's custodianship, as well as to produce official agricultural statistics. So if the presentation, if the screen has been shared successfully, I would just move on. So
yeah, we can see it.
Perfect, thank you. So today I'd like to talk to you about the use of alternative data sources for the monitoring of SDG environmental indicators and the specific case of satellite data and geospatial data set. Very rapidly, I will just highlight what is the role of FAO as a custodian agency, which are the key advantages of Earth observation data for the SDG monitoring, how they relate to the indicators under FAO's custodianship. And then given the limited time we have, I would like to provide an example just for one SDG, which is SDG 15, and more specifically, the indicator 15.4.2. So FAO, as you may already know, is a custodian of 21 SDG indicators. So being a custodian agency comes with some responsibilities, and more specifically, FAO supports countries to develop the statistical capacity to generate, disseminate, and use national data, as well as realign their national monitoring frameworks to SDG indicators. Then it leads the methodological development of indicators, collecting data from national sources, ensuring their comparability and consistency, and disseminating them at global level. And number three, it contributes to monitoring progress at the global, regional, and national levels, providing inputs to the global and regional SDG progress reports, providing analytical reports, and more recently developing its own digital SDG progress report. So the SDG that FAO is custodian, the SDG indicators that are under custody of FAO, they fall under the SDG 2, 5, 6, 12, 14, and 15. They are listed in the table there. When it comes to satellite data and more in general geospatial, so how do they help? Why are they useful? Geospatial information and satellite Earth observations offer unprecedented opportunities to support the national and global statistical systems. The key benefits are more timely statistical outputs, reduced frequency of surveys, spatial explicit information, hence disaggregation, and improvement of survey design through stratification and other techniques, which in the end result in optimization of the resources. As we know, surveys are quite expensive activities. What is the relevance of the Earth observations in regards to the SDG indicators under FAO's custodianship? So in this table, we have assessed for each of the indicator where we see more fit the role of Earth observation. So we have four main roles: that of acting as a key source or primary source of information for the indicator, as a secondary source, or for disaggregation purposes, or for statistical for the design, of the surveys. So in some cases, of course, they are not exclusive. So in some indicators, Earth observation can be used for more than one dimension. So just to provide an example, for example, Q41 is the Agricultural Sustainability Index. And as you may know, it's quite a complex indicator. So it is it measures the proportion of productive agricultural land, sustainable agriculture over the total agricultural area. And within this indicator, there are sub-indicators, some of which they can be monitored through Earth observation as a key source, for instance, the soil health and the water use, or they can be, or in other cases, that Earth observations can be used as a secondary source. For example, it would be for the fertilizer pollution sub-indicator, for fertilizer risk, and for biodiversity. The same applies also for other indicators, such as 641, for instance, or 642, hence water stress or efficient water use efficiency. But today, as I anticipated, I would like to focus on the 15.4.2, which is the Mountain Green Cover Index. As this indicator, as you will see, is mainly based on land cover, land use definition, and therefore there is a strong case for Earth observations to be used as actually the primary source to measure the indicator, and as well, to disaggregate it at different resolutions, and to optimize the design of surveys. So let's look a bit inside this indicator. So 15.4.2, it's also called the Mountain Green Cover Index, MGCI. The MGCI is defined as the ratio of the mountain green cover area to the total mountain area, as you can see in the formula. So the mountain green cover area is defined as the sum of mountain area, it's a surface, so for instance, square kilometers, covered by green vegetation, hence cropland, grassland, forest land, shrubland, and wetland, as defined, for instance, by the IPCC classification. Whereas the total mountain area is defined according to the CAPOS definition. So CAPOS et al. Had defined the global mountain range definition. So therefore, this indicator is essentially a land cover, land use based indicator. And FAO has developed in 2020 a methodology to measure and monitoring it using freely available global land cover data and elevation data. Such methodology can be used by countries as it is, or it can be customized by using national data set for land cover and also mountain elevation. The methodology was used by FAO to support the countries during the reporting cycle in 2020. And it was shared together with the estimates the FAO had calculated with the countries, as we will see in a later slide. I just want to provide a sneak peek into the methodology. So the input data are basically two. On one side, land cover, and on the other side, mountain elevation. And of course, land cover, we need a time series of that. In our case, we used the European Space Agency Climate Change Initiative land cover products. So it's quite a long-spanning, wide-spanning time series. So from 1992 until 2018, and now there's going to be also the new updates for 2019 and 20. Whereas for the mountain range, we use the CAPOS dataset. The methodology, so what is the model like? First of all, we reclassified the land cover map into a binary map, so either green or non-green cover land. And then we overlay that with the mountain ranges, so our mountainous areas. And then we calculate through zonal statistics, basically, the distribution of the green or non-green areas within each elevation range. And then we calculate the ratio between the area of green cover over the total mountain area. So it's quite straightforward. And therefore, in this way, we can calculate the indicator, the 15.4.2. Any software can be used to achieve this in a quite agile manner. So software such as GIS, which also has a plugin for Google Earth Engine, or it can be run directly in Google Earth Engine, which is commercial. We can just Python, for example, the library. So what did I do in 2000? So we used the time series. We calculated the time series from the year 2000 until 2018. We provided national estimates of the indicator disaggregated by mountain range. We also additionally calculated the land cover statistics for the same years and at the same spatial resolution, spatial aggregation. We used the ESA, we used the European Space Agency Climate Change Initiative Global Land Cover Time Series. And finally, the results were shared. Sorry, I cannot. I'm trying to get back control of the presentation. Okay, because it has an animation. Okay, so the results were shared with countries to support their SDG reporting efforts. So for each country, we produced a report basically containing the statistics. Furthermore, we accompanied these reports with a WebGIS application to allow them an easier validation task. So the application, again, is quite straightforward. It allows to easily compare the land cover map with the mountain elevation, mountain range map, or the green and non-green map with the mountain range map. Furthermore, we developed a rather comprehensive map story, which purpose is really to disseminate, to raise awareness on the methodology, so more details are provided on the methodology and the data used. And finally, we have compiled a scientific paper, which is now under the peer review, just to make sure that we can share as much as possible the methodology. And with this, I'd like to thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Lorenzo, for the excellent presentation and for providing a specific example on how Earth observation and satellite imagery is really used to measure an SDG. I think that it's really useful to have that sort of detail. So if everyone could keep their mics on mute, that would be great. I'm getting quite a lot of feedback. And with that, I would like to now hand over to Dilek, who's going to switch directions and talk to us about citizen science applications. Dilek, you have the floor.
Thank you, Jillian. Hello, everyone. I'd like to thank first the organizers for inviting me to join this panel, and thanks, Jillian, for the nice introduction at the start. My name is Dilek Freisel, and my talk is about citizen science and how it could help monitoring the SDGs with a focus on environmental SDG indicators. Next slide, please. So I would like to start with the definition of citizen science, as I see that there's some confusion around the use of this term, especially within the data communities. This is probably because there are very different definitions and terms that are used to describe citizen science activities. So our approach to this is looking at those definitions and terms and find some common characteristics in them and be inclusive at the same time. So we define citizen science as voluntary public participation in scientific research and knowledge production. For example, the terms that you hear, such as citizen-generated data, participatory research, crowdsourcing, community-based monitoring, could all be considered as citizen science according to our approach. The reason why there are different definitions out there is probably because they come into existence in different contexts, cultures, countries, scientific disciplines, and because of that, they reflect the peculiarities of those contexts they derive from, which actually shows the richness of the field. So last summer, we published the paper that you see on the screen in journal Sustainability Science, which was a systematic review of citizen science initiatives at local, national, and global scales. So we looked at the existing examples and also the review of SDG indicators, including their metadata and methodologies. Our aim with this was to identify which citizen science initiatives could contribute to the monitoring of which SDG indicators. Next slide, please. So on this slide, you see the results of our work. I won't go into details here, but I encourage you to read the paper, and the paper includes a supplementary table that shows exactly which project could contribute to the monitoring of which SDG indicator and how and why. And if interest, contact those initiatives or us, please, directly. I shared my contact information before at the start of the presentation, and I'm happy to share it again. And I will put the link to the paper and that includes the supplementary table in the chat after my talk. So just briefly, what we see in this figure is that there is an untapped potential for citizen science data to contribute to SDG monitoring. And these are highlighted in yellow boxes on this slide or in this figure. And this potential is only realized just for a few indicators, and these are the green boxes here. So our findings also show that citizen science data are already contributing and could potentially contribute to 33% of the SDG indicators. And we also identified that, because it's very relevant to this webinar we're having right now, citizen science data have the greatest potential for input to the environmental SDG indicators. And considering that, as Jillian highlighted at the start, 68% of the environmental SDG indicators like data, we should really start thinking about how we should act on harnessing the potential of citizen science for SDG monitoring. And actually, we should act on that as soon as possible, which actually we're currently doing in Ghana that I will talk about soon. Before that, just a few quick examples on what you see on the slides in terms of how citizen science data could support the monitoring of environmental SDG indicators. For example, the project Freshwater Watch or other citizen science initiatives that monitor water quality could support the monitoring of 6.3.2, or another project that is from IASA, Picture Pile, that integrates Earth observation and citizen science approaches that could be used to monitor some of the land use, land cover related indicators, such as 15.1.1 on forest area, 15.2.1 on sustainable forest management, and many other indicators, because this is a flexible tool. And another example that I could give is City Oasis for the monitoring of 11.7.2 on built-up areas. I know that this is also very relevant to the work that RG and the community, Earth observation community, have been doing with the SDG 11 toolkit exercise. Because this indicator is about built-up areas of cities that are open spaces. Exactly, this actually reflects on the potential of complementary use of Earth observation and citizen science for monitoring the SDGs. So these are just a few indicators that could benefit from citizen science data. As I mentioned, I will share the link to the paper in the chat and in the supplementary table or material. You will see all these projects in detail together with how we justify that they could be used for monitoring particular SDG indicators. Next slide, please. Now I'll try to briefly talk about the example in Ghana. With this research that I talked to you today about, we were very much interested in applying the results of that research in real context. So we created a partnership with the Ghana Statistical Service, Ghana EPA, UNEP, UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, Thematic Research Network on Data and Statistics, Earth Challenge 2020, the Wilson Center, and many others, and called it Citizen Science for the SDGs, or CS for the SDGs project for Ghana. And as part of this project, based on the data gaps and needs of Ghana's Statistical Service, we identify a few SDG indicators to use citizen science approaches to monitor and report on the SDGs. We're currently working on the Marine Nether SDG indicator, as RG highlighted before, 14.1.1b. And this project is about actually leveraging existing citizen science networks and projects to monitor this indicator on the ground. And as part of the project, we partnered with the Ocean Conservancy's International Coastal Cleanup Initiative, which organizes cleanups and collect data globally since more than 30 years, and Smart Nature Free Youth Volunteers Foundation of Ghana, which is the local volunteer group that Ocean Conservancy has been working with in Ghana. And they have been collecting data and litter in Ghana already for quite some time. And now through this partnership, we're aiming to leverage these data for monitoring of this indicator by creating this key partnership. At this stage, the Ghana Statistical Service and EPA are going through the data validation process, and if all goes well, we will be able to use these data from the Citizen Science Initiative and volunteer groups to report on the indicator 14.1.1b by the mid-May deadline. And at the same time, UNEP and partners and us are working with the Ocean Conservancy on improving their methodologies to align their methodology completely, fully with the global marine indicator methodology. So we've come this far in this project, but it hasn't been so easy, and we've all learned a lot from this process. One of the most valuable lessons that I will talk about very briefly is that working with existing initiatives, tools, and leveraging their methodology and data is much more beneficial and time and resource efficient than starting an initiative from scratch, especially the current struggles of the NSOs and countries with the SDG indicator framework are considered. Additionally, because existing networks have already their local networks established, it's highly likely that a sustainable data collection effort will be in place through such partnerships, and this also means more efficient and effective data collection efforts for the countries. And of course, one of the most important things is building trust, common goals, and ownership in projects through such partnerships is the key, and we're very grateful to have wonderful partners in this project that work towards the same goal. That's the end of my presentation, and thank you.
Thank you, Dilek. I think that this provided an excellent example of an area that maybe many people in national statistical offices are not familiar with, and still there is sort of a growing awareness and a growing dialogue on how can citizen science data actually be brought into official statistical systems. And I think this is a very practical example of how this can be done, which could be replicated for other areas. And it's certainly not only marine litter that this is about. So with that, we are a little behind schedule. So I'm going to hand right over to Jimena, who is going to provide us with a more specific example from the Mexico case. So Jimena, you have the floor.
Gillian. Hello, everyone. Well, it's very humbling to be sharing the panel with these amazing colleagues, but I feel very grateful to be here. My contribution to this panel, as mentioned, is sharing the national experience of Mexico in the strengthening of the spatial data infrastructure, like for the use of Earth observations, and in this case, specifically in the progress towards the environment goals that we have in INEGI. INEGI is a national statistics office as well as a national geographic office, so it has this dual role within the nation. Please, next slide. So I want to talk about the tool called Mexican Geospatial Data Cube, MGDC for short. This tool is based on the software Open Data Cube, which is an open and flexible development, and it's this flexibility that has allowed us to perform the customizations needed in order to be able to adapt into our national servers and infrastructure. At the moment, it is a data management tool in a summary. At the moment, it offers to internal users services like access to the Landsat archive, which is like a 100 terabytes of information organized in a simple manner for either visualization, download, or analysis. And we are also developing further services, for example, the custom performance of processings for the state units that are in the need of new information products. We also are preparing what we call the tiny data cube, which is a light version of this data cube that holds only a small amount of this information. What you are seeing in the slide in the left part is the GeoMedium product, which is already published in his website. Down in this slide, you can see the link where you can access the site dedicated to this tool and to the visualization of this product. The GeoMedium is an annual summary of all of the images that are available during a period of 1 year. So we have basically 30 annual products published for all of the country. At the moment, we have published this not only for internal user, but for any user, because capacity building is key in order to have this tool being correctly and adequately adopted in the products and the processes to produce information in INEGI. So internally, we have a lot of very skilled areas that have already implemented this tool in their processes, like the area of natural resources, which are using this tool as a data source for their land cover and vegetation map, as well as the area of hydrology, who are using this also as an input for their product of the catalog of water bodies. There are also other research areas like those that are in charge of the cartography of the urban actualization cartography, as well as population estimations that are also taking a look and exploring the possibilities of these tools. The idea of sharing these tools is that we want to be very aligned with the philosophy of the Open Data Cube environment, which is open and closing the gap between the data and the users. And we know that we are not, we will never be enough people in INEGI to solve all of the problems and to produce a methodology for all of the indicators. But if we reach out to all of the state units and all of the academic institutions that are interested and that can perform their exploratory experiments in order to address more needs of the national agenda, then that's our approach, and that I think that's the best way that we can do it. On this occasion, I will focus on the uses of this product, the GeoMedium, just because I think it's relevant, because it's already published in the website, and you can already see this product. You can download it and perform the analysis that I will show you. Please go to the next slide. It's also worth mentioning that in the building of this tool, the data cube, we chose a geographic projection that is called Albert's key area. So this geographic projection reduces it reduces the sorry, I forgot the word, but the area of each pixel.
Information.
Yes, thank you. It's directly converted to a surface measure. So the deformation, thank you, is a list in the area variable. So the surface statistics or surface variables are very present in the SDGs. So that shows the level of commitment that INEGI has with reporting to the SDGs. This is not the projection that was commonly used on INEGI's product, but since the idea is massively performing analysis for the whole cover of the nation, it's also good for the big data approach needed, because the processing will be equal to all of these pixels. These two examples that I will show you, first, please click in the first video. These are two geomedians, almost 30 years apart, in a false color scheme. And we are looking at the deforestation. This is an area close to the Lacandona jungle. So this is the Mexico's lung, let's say. Can you go back to the video again? What we are seeing is a division in the behavior marked by the line that is shown in there. This line is a river, but it is also the border of a national protected area. So where the area that remains in red shows that this national protected area, which is a public policy, has shown a good effect. Outside of this area, we see a vast deforestation of this jungle. This allows us to see the value of the use of Earth observations to observe the presence of vegetation, and this can also be combined with a digital elevation model in order to address indicator 15.4.2, which was already commented by my colleagues in the panel. The next example, using the geomedian to observe the presence of water, is the Chapala Lake, close to the city of Guadalajara. And we are looking at the surface, annual summary of the surface of this lake. We can see that in the 2002, we have the smallest surface, but due to the public policy, in order to best use or to manage the use of this lake, the surface of the lake was recovered. By the last year, I think it's 2019, we see that the recovery is around 20% of the surface. This is an example of the use of the geomedian, but we also can use the data cube for indicator 6.6.1 water surface, because we can observe the water in dry season and rain season and observe the different behavior of the year of the lake in a whole year, because and also it's useful for our national information production, since we have the water bodies catalog, and it has this definition of what is a constant presence of a water body and the area that it's floatable. So the change throughout the year, we also address in these national products. So these are the two examples of the use of the geomedian produced by the Mexican Data Cube implementation. With that, I finished my presentation, and I hope I can address all of your questions in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this presentation. And I think that this has provided us with a broad perspective of some of the new data sources that are being used in the SDGs, some new methods, and how these are being implemented by both global entities and at the national level. As a person who also works in this field, I think that one of the big challenges that we have is really, how do we take these types of examples and upscale them so that they are really used broadly and used by decision makers? And additionally, how do we take the country experiences that we have and replicate them and get more and more countries to have the capacity and the interest in doing this sort of analysis. So I'm going to start off with a question that's been brought up by a few different people in the chat, and it was something that was also identified prior to the session. So this is a question that both Nicholas, who didn't mention where he was from, and Ursula from Poland brought up in the chat, which is, how do we actually make sure that the data quality of these new different data sources is high enough, and that it is able to produce comparable results across time and across place? And so I'm going to first go to you, Dilek, because I think that in general, people often have this concern about citizen science data. And then I'll also ask RG the same question. So Dilek, what are your views?
Sure. Thank you, Jillian, for the question. So if you look at the projects whose data that are already being used for SDG monitoring, or best practices, if you like, We see that they have some protocols and some methodologies in place, as well as quality assurance and quality control processes to ensure the use of their data for scientific and policy purposes. And projects may have different purposes, and based on that, different levels of requirements in terms of quality and methodology. So just to give an example, while we were conducting our research, as Jillian, you already know, we came across projects that only need small adjustments or minor tweaks in their methodologies for their data to be used for SDG monitoring, such as the Ocean Conservancy project and methodology that I mentioned in my Ghana example. But we also saw projects that would require major improvements if their data would feed into the SDG monitoring processes. And in the end, this is about the end goal and design. So what's important to remember, particularly in the case of citizen science, we shouldn't be judging citizen science as a field in terms of methodology and norms, but we should be looking into individual citizen science projects that we aim to work with, and to make a judgment on meeting the methodological requirements and data needs of that specific SDG indicator, and initiating a conversation with the key stakeholders, including national statistical offices and also custodian agencies, certainly help improve data quality and also methodologies of these indicators, so that or projects, so that their results could be used for SDG monitoring. And in terms of, again, if I go back to Ghana example, because this is a quite good one, UNEP, the custodian agency for this SDG indicator, is working with citizen science initiatives to help them standardize or to help them improve their methodology so that it meets the requirements of the global methodology for this particular SDG indicator. And there are, for other type of citizen science initiatives within the citizen science community, there's quite some work going on through the working groups of the associations and others to standardize approaches to data collection so that this comparability aspect could be achieved. Thank you.
Great, and I can add to that. I think Dilek already provided a great answer here. I definitely think that one way of addressing issues of comparability and also standards has been by intercomparison exercises and looking at supporting the use of, for instance, same algorithms to generate indicators, leveraging global data sets and then national data sets. And there are several tools and efforts that are ongoing. For instance, in some of the examples that I showed, one of the tools that UNCCD and the Trends That Earth tool that they're using includes the ability to leverage and use default data sets, but also upload national level data sets to test and compare results. So there's certainly a lot in that, and we're also looking to do that more in the EO Toolkit effort that I also presented on for urban-related indicators, where we recognize that there is this is work in progress, and more can be done, especially through partnerships and collaboration between national statistics offices, responsible ministries, and the Earth observation data providers and community to support such activities, so to help enhance efforts to identify suitability and fit for purposefulness of specific data sets. Of course, there have also already, as mentioned, a lot has been done with respect to identifying and sharing information on minimum data standards, data quality standards, for instance, in terms of temporal coverage or grid cell size or other types of information that are necessary for a data set to be conducive to national reporting on a specific indicator. And so that is available for many of the adapted or used global data sets in some of these indicators. I will also point lastly to the work that the GeoLand Degradation Neutrality Initiative has completed in the recent months to help define minimum data quality standards and develop some of these decision trees. You can find more information about that, and I think this is a very useful interactive process through workshops and engagement of data providers and data users that have helped develop those decision trees and quality standards for global data sets. So I would advise, or I would suggest that people look at that as well.
Thank you very much. I think that it's a great point here that we do need to bring in this type of data. We don't really have a choice because the resources for measuring the environment are limited. And so if we don't use the new data sources and invest in this type of data quality assurance and ensuring that we have the methodologies that make these applicable, then there's really no other way to measure the environmental dimension of the SDGs. And this is a point that's also been brought up in the chat and prior to the meeting. It is really, how do we do two things here? How do we build a business case for investing in measuring the environment? How do we build the capacity of the data users and the data community at the national level to the point where they really have an interest in this data and that they are willing to invest? Because even if we use some new data sources like Earth observation and citizen science, there still needs to be an investment, of course, in national capacity. And how do we then also train people? So I'm going to start off with asking Jemina if you could reflect on this. There's a specific question from Caddy in the chat that says, for developing countries who have limited financial resources, what makes them invest in monitoring these environmental SDGs? And I think this is a great question for you, Jemina, because Mexico has made this investment. And so if you could sort of walk us through from your perspective, what do you think created the situation where Mexico was able to realize that this was something that was worth investing in? Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very ad hoc, this question, because I trained in Australia and I was able to see the different approach in there. So they have a supercomputer, they already had the data available. And in our case, we had to expand our computing systems because we were not able at the time to think of going to the cloud. And that's not that's not because of the cost, but it's because of our national laws that won't allow information to go in external servers from INEGI. So in that way, we had a smaller server in order to perform the analysis that Australia was performing very easily in their supercomputer. But for Mexico, the decision, I think, was because this tool, the Open Data Cube tool, is open and the data is open, and the approach is always looking to be open for the government. So their goal is always to is focused in attending these very specific needs of the public sector. The Landsat archive is a very rich resource for the analysis of the territory. We are also trying to integrate it with the statistical information, but it's a very rich resource because it goes back almost 40 years back. So you are able to construct very consistent time series that you can link to the information that you already have as an NSO or as a cartographic agency. So the potential of this archive, it's mostly the historic archive. The potential of this archive combined with other data sets that you already own is, I think, the reason that convinced us to go in and achieve what we have achieved so far. And also in terms of Mexico, we are, well, for INEGI, sorry, we are the coordinators of the information production as well as producers of information. And we, in this way, are very aware of the needs of information of other state units. So we were able to exchange these ideas and these necessities of these data gaps and these information gaps. We saw this fit most needs. So it was a global solution, an integral solution to many different issues, and it's not worth it to duplicate efforts. This community of Open Data Cube is very open. The tools and the algorithms and most of the advances are always being posted somewhere online. So it was not useful, or it was not efficient to produce something of our own. And we have the conviction that this tool will be implemented in the future. We have as an NSO and as a data center, national data center, we have a vision to implement anything, but in the long future, in the long term. So we are very resistant to adopt something if we don't know if it's a long-term solution. And in the case of combining geospatial information with anything that we see in the systems of information production, we saw it a full fit. And so my recommendation, my basic recommendation to countries in development, I think is don't duplicate. This community is very well advanced. I think that the work that INEGI did should not be repeated by someone else. We should share this experience and help the next one, and also the advances. Sometimes it's very hard to have everything published and all of the advances somewhere in the documentation, but there are forums that can allow you to be as updated as possible. So most of the work is already done. It's only a matter of commitment and preparing yourself, getting the skills, I think. Also, the acquisition of the data is constantly easier. Some very big cloud services providers already hold these archives. So in our case, we had to think of the way to download it. Then we talked to NASA, and they were very kind to provide this archive to us. But these data sets are already available in most cloud service providers. So I think it's just a matter of considering all of the data gaps and data needs that you have internally, and see if this is a fit for these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that this is an excellent point, and it also reminds me of RG's presentation on the SDG 11 toolbox. I mean, if we have sort of global resources that people can draw from, then it provides a starting point for getting this going. I would now like to ask you, Lorenzo, a very similar question. As you demonstrated for Mountain Green Cover Index, but this applies to a lot of the different indicators of FAO and other custodian agencies, which is if you have a global data product that you can use, but then you are also recommending nationalization of such a global data product, which is the case for Mountain Green Cover. How would you advise that countries get started on that nationalization? How do they then work towards having something that they're comfortable with at the national level, and how do they use that as an opportunity to build their own capacity? Lorenzo, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much for this very interesting question. So it is important to bear in mind that in the SDG process, the country are in driving seat. So they are the ones who need to agree with the estimates and make them official. So FAO is just helping them. But in the end, in the driving seat, there is the country. Now, the benefit of using existing global data set, of course, it's clear, it's patent, because basically there is a third party who takes care of producing that global data set, of ensuring the quality and to maintain it in time. Of course, we're not looking at data set of, let's say, that has not been validated. So we're talking about, let's say, vetted products. Now, we advise countries to use their own data set because, of course, it's in their own interest to have control over the data that they're going to report on. They're going to feel more comfortable. They're going to feel ownership of that. In the cases where a country does not have the foundation spatial layers, they don't produce it, on a regular basis, then, of course, The role of FAO is to provide technical support in building those pillars so that then you can establish a monitoring based on geospatial data. So we are talking about geospatial data here. For instance, if a country has to report on use of fertilizers or use of water in agriculture and is lacking a dynamic way to actually monitor the irrigated areas, then the idea is to build capacity there, to build the so-called crop type maps first, and to do it in a way that is cost efficient so that they can repeat the exercise in time. So I think on one side, you have a solution using global data set that allows you to get started immediately. You can use an online platform, for example, Google Earth Engine or others. There is the Digital Earth Africa, for example, which is a continental data cube. And you can basically connect to existing global data set. So you just play with your algorithms, you finely tune them to your area, and that's a way to start. You can start to see also what type of results you have, and if you're also comfortable with the results, because let's not forget that global data set, they come with some compromise in thematic accuracy, in spatial resolution. So there are cases where a global data set may not be fit for purpose. And at the same time, work on the capacity to start to produce those data sets for your own country, or if you're already producing them, to find a way to produce them maybe more frequently. So to stabilize your production chain, so that then you can have a dense time series, and then from there on you can monitor in time the various indicators. And maybe one last recommendation, of course, linking to the previous question, how a country can start to invest, with limited resources. So first of all, trying to look at all of the freely available resources out there in terms of data, in terms of computing capacity. So I would, recommend that. But then, of course, if you want to build a national data cube, I suppose that you will need to have an investment there because you need to keep it up and running. So it's a different situation, but there are very good reasons to do that because, I mean, the Australians, from what I read, and Jimena might confirm this, they did a very important study before they went for the digital data cube, and they realized how much they would have lost in 20 years from now if they didn't use Earth observation. So they saw an opportunity in the long term. That's from my point of view, that's the right way to look at things, but somehow, not everybody has the same political support or the same funds availability. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that answer. I think that all of the panelists have done an amazing job demonstrating how we can use some of these non-traditional data sources for measuring the environment. Unfortunately, I believe that we are out of time, and so we are going to have to wrap up, even though there are many other questions that people ask in the chat and ask before the meeting. I would encourage everyone who is listening in, please contact any of us. I'm speaking for the panelists, but I'm assuming that they don't mind. All of the presentations will be made public, and our emails are included in this also. And I just want to sort of leave with one final thought from Voltaire is, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, which what I mean by this is I think that all of the panelists have demonstrated that we just need to get started on a path. And I have the impression from working in this field that a lot of NSOs worry so much about data quality that it causes a bit of paralysis because you keep questioning yourself, is this good enough? Is the quality high enough? And I think that we all need to keep in mind that measuring the environment is still a bit of a new field. And so while you're getting started, use the data that's available and work on improving the quality over time, and having something now is the best way to get that started. So with that, I am going to wrap this up, and I would like to thank all of the excellent presentations and the views from the panelists. It's amazing work that everyone is doing, and there's lots more amazing work going on, I'm sure, by those of you in the chat also. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye.